Okay, so here's a little recap about area and perimeter. So we'll start with perimeter. Perimeter is the distance around the edge of a shape. So in this example we have a rectangle and the length of the rectangle is 8 centimetres, the width of the rectangle is 5 centimetres. Because it's a rectangle and we know that rectangles have pairs of equal sides, we know that this side is going to be 5 centimetres and this side is going to be 8 centimetres. Then what you need to do with perimeter is add up all of the lengths together. Now, if you want to, you can either do 5 times 2, add 8 times 2. So 5 times 2 would be 10. 8 times 2 would be 16. And then add them together, which would give you 26. So that's one way of doing it, because if you've got 8 and 8, 5 and 5, that would give you 26 centimetres altogether. So that's one way. The other way is that you could say that if you've got 5 and 8, 5 and 8, that you've got 5 add 8 twice. So 5 add 8 is 13 centimetres, and 2 lots of 13 centimetres is 26 centimetres. Remember, it's always a good idea to write on the shape to help you do your working out. If you've got a more complicated shape, do make use of your pen and the shape, put a line through the sides as you count them, and then you know you've counted every side. Okay, so now we're going to look at area, and we've got the same shape. Now, unfortunately, this tool that I'm using doesn't have a straight line drawer, which is very annoying, but there you go. So what I've tried to do is draw on the lines on the rectangle to show you what this rectangle would look like if it was split into squares. So we would have 5 rows and we would have 8 columns. Okay, so when you're looking at area, what you're looking at is how many squares would there be inside that shape. And we would be having square centimetres because we're dealing in centimetres at the moment with this question. So if I've got 5 lots of 8, I'm doing 5 times 8, which is 40, and I'm dealing in centimetres, and because I'm looking at squares, I'm doing 40 centimetres squared. So the area of this shape is 40 centimetres squared. And if you were to count all of these squares, you will find that there are 40. If you want to, you can pause the video and count them if you'd like to have a check. So 5 times 8 is 40, and that's how we work out the area. Okay, so we're now going to look at a more complicated shape, a compound shape they're sometimes called, or sometimes they're called rectilinear shapes. So we're going to start with the perimeter. The first thing you need to do is work out if there are any missing lengths that you don't know. In this example, we know that the maximum length is 10 centimetres. So we look at the other edges that are parallel to this one, this horizontal edge. And the other edges that are parallel are this edge and this edge. Some people find it useful to mark the parallel edges in a different colour. So we could mark this as the horizontal ones could be blue, and we could mark the vertical edges in red. And some people find that useful because it helps them to identify the edges that they need to compare when they're trying to work out missing lengths. So if we're looking at the missing lengths here, we've got the 10 that we identified a moment ago and the 6 here. So the 10 and the 6. So the other edge that's parallel is this one here. And we know that 10 take away 6 leaves us with 4. So we can be quite sure that that's 4 centimetres. Then we look at the ones we've marked in red, the vertical lines. We've got 9 here, 2 here. So the one that's left is this one. So 9 take away 2 is 7. And we can quite clearly see from that this diagram is definitely not to scale, because this edge looks the same length as this one. And this is supposed to be 2. This is supposed to be 4. So it's clearly not to scale, and you should never assume that it is to scale, okay? Because quite often it won't be. Now that we've worked out all of our edges, and we've got all of the ones that are missing, we can count them up and add them together to get our perimeter. And as we do that, it's really useful to make a line through the edge, and then you know you've counted it. And also, if you know that you're not very good at adding up several numbers in your head, it might be useful to write them down the side, and it might be useful to write down the total as you go along. So the ones that I need to add up are 2, 6, 7, 4, 9, 10. Okay, so I've put a line through each edge. I could also count them at this point. I could say, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, it matches up. Okay, so now I can add them up. Now I'm going to look for numbers that go together to make tens. So 6 and 4 make 10, and 10. So that's going to be 20. Then I've got 9 and 7, which is 16, and 2. 38. So my perimeter here, 38 centimetres. I know it's centimetres because that's what's written on the question, and that's the unit of measurement that we're dealing with. So I'm now going to look at the area, and there's a few different ways of doing this, you might remember. So you can choose to look at it as 2 separate shapes, and you might cut it off that way, but you might cut it off there instead. Okay, so sometimes it'll depend on the measurements that you've already got. So we've got 6 times 2, so I know that that's 12, and then all I've got to do is work out what this one is. So it's up to you. You have to look at it and decide which one's the easiest way. The third way is that you could imagine it's a complete square or rectangle, and you could work out what it would be if it was intact, and then take away this part and find out what's left. So there's a few different ways of doing it. You've got to do the way that makes sense to you and that you're the most comfortable with. I'm going to do it by working out the 2 separate rectangles and putting them together. So I know that this one is 6 times 2, that makes 12. And then I know that this side is 9, and I worked out earlier that this was 4. So I know that 9 times 4 is 36. So 36 add 12 is 48. So the area of the total shape is those two combined together, which is 48 centimetres squared. So I thought it might be useful to go through a couple of the questions. So these two shapes have the same perimeter. We've got a regular hexagon. So it's telling us that for a reason. Regular means that all of the sides are the same length. So even if in the drawing it doesn't look like all of the edges are the same, because we've been told that it's a regular hexagon, we can be quite sure that the intention is that these sides are all going to be the same length. Okay? And it also does say not actual size. But even if it doesn't say that, you should never assume that the diagram is to scale. Okay? Then you've also got the square. So the length of each side of the hexagon is 8 centimetres. Now, you might think, right, I already know that hexagons have 6 sides. So I already know that 6 times 8 is 48. Okay? Or you might need to say, right, well, I'm going to put an 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8. And I'm going to count in 8s to add them up. You might do it that way. So you might say 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48. Okay, we know it's 48 centimetres. So then we know that the square also has a perimeter of 48 centimetres. And for that, also we know because it's a square that it's going to have 4 equal sides. So we can divide 48 by 4. Okay, so have a little think. What would 48 divided by 4 be? Pause the video, try to work it out for yourself. Okay, so 48 divided by 4 would be 12. So I'll write that down here. It's always worth showing our working out. Okay, so we now know that each side of this square is 12 centimetres. Then we're being asked to work out the area of the square. So we know that area is worked out by timesing the length by the width. So we need to do 12 times 12. Have a go at working that out for yourself. You can pause the video. Okay, hopefully you should know what 12 times 12 is without working it out, because if you're practicing your times tables, which I'm hoping that you are, you would know that 12 times 12 is 144. And that is our answer, 144 centimetres squared. So we're going to go through question 2 as well. Lara has some identical rectangles. They are 7 centimetres long and 2 centimetres wide. So 2 wide, 7 long, remember, not actual size. So that's some key information that we need to know to answer this question. She's using 5 of her rectangles to make the large rectangle below. So it's a good idea to write the information you know already onto your diagrams that you've got in the question. Make use of them to help you to get your thinking out there and put down what you know. So we know that each of these top edges is going to be 2. And we know that this longer edge is going to be 7. It asks us, what's the perimeter of the large rectangle? So large rectangle means this one that she's made, that she's put together. So perimeter, we know that the long edge is 5 lots of 2, which we know is 10. And we know that this width is 7. So we've got 10, 10, 7, 7. Or we can say 7 add 10 and times that by 2. So the perimeter, have a go at working it out. What do you think it is? Pause the video. Okay, so hopefully you've either done 10 and 10, which is 20, 7 and 7, which is 14, 20 add 14 is 34, or you've done 10 add 7 is 17, times 2 is 34. Okay, so the area of the large rectangle. So again, we know that to do the area, we've got to times the length by the width. 10 times 7, which is, pause the video, try and work it out, 70. So the area will be 70. Okay, so I thought it might be useful to also go through question 6 because I'm aware that we haven't done a lot on area of triangles. So I wanted to recap this. So the question says, draw a rectangle on the grid that has half the area of the shaded triangle. Use a ruler. Now, I haven't got a ruler, so you'll have to forgive me because this program, the software that I'm using, doesn't have a straight line tool. Okay, so the triangle is 6 squares on this side, so I'm going to assume centimetres, and 4 squares on this side. So if it were a complete rectangle, the complete rectangle's area would be 6 times 4, which is 24. And we know that the triangle is taking up half of that space, because if you turned it around, you could see that the triangle is mirrored on this side. Okay, so it's half of 24, which is 12. So the rectangle that we need to draw has to be 12 squares. And if we know our factors of 12, we know that we could draw a triangle that was 4 by 3. Or we could draw a triangle that was 2 by 6. Or we could draw a triangle that was 1 by 12. Oop, not quite long enough there. And that would be half the area of the shaded triangle. Okay, so that was a quick recap of area and perimeter. If there is anything you're stuck on, any questions that you're not sure about, just email me and I'll do a quick little explanation like this. Okay?